All right, welcome everybody to the 4 p.m. City Council work session. We have all council members with the exception of Council Member Heyer and Vice Chair White, who have asked to be excused. And we should be joined online with Council Member Chaburka. It's not online yet, but hopefully will be joining us soon. As it stands, that means there's 4 of us, which is a quorum. Don't all get up and get your lunch at the same time. Otherwise, we might be in trouble with that. So we have just a brief council meeting tonight, some consent items. We'll actually have a presentation on that just to kind of give some context to the timing and everything. We've all been in the middle of this budget cycle, and so this will just help everyone see where we are and what the next steps are for commenting and that. We do have on the agenda a closed session if we feel like we need to move into closed session. And after our discussion today, we'll see if that's some, or in the work session, if that's something we want to work towards. So any questions on the agenda there? Any comments on that? Pretty straightforward. And we are joined by Councilmember Chaburka. Hello, Councilmember Chaburka.
Hello.
All right. Up first in our work session, we have Heather Brisky, our HR manager, and Milena Halverson with the McGrath Human Resources Group to present to us on the compensation study and proposed salary schedules. If you'll just make sure the microphone's on so folks online can hear you.
Good evening. Thank you for letting us present. I just wanted to do a quick introduction. Milena Halverson Mays is our senior consultant with McGrath HR Group. And I've been working with her hand in hand throughout this whole process. So she's kind of going to give you a rundown of the whole compensation structure, the compensation philosophies and whatnot that we've kind of talked about over the last couple of weeks. And so she's our expert. So if you have questions, please let her know.
All righty.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And my name is Milena Halverson Mays. I am a senior consultant with the firm. A little bit about our firm. We are a public sector consulting firm. We specialize purely to the public sector, and we have 2 different areas of expertise. We do compensation and benefits, which is the HR side. That is where I work out of. And then we also do have a public safety division where we provide additional service to fire, police, EMS type organizations. I am one of 2 consultants that is actually utilized over on the public safety side as well. That's important because you do have public safety wages that it was part of this study, and there are some unique nuances that come with public sector wages. So this evening, I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I want to walk through with you, and I feel that it highlights some of the major areas of your project that I think are going to be important for you as you get into or start finalizing your budget, simply because the recommended compensation changes are included in your upcoming budget cycle. So in order to do that, let's start out with talking about how things are looking at a national level, and then we're going to start talking a little bit more specific to Ogden. There are a lot of reasons why the public sector is being challenged in keeping their positions filled, both for purposes of recruitment as well as retention. And I'm not going to read all of these off to you here this evening, but over the past several years, we've been compiling this list because it seems that public sector has been an absolute uphill battle with recruitment and retention. And there's a couple real key things here. First of all is we're losing our human capital in the public sector. We don't do a very good job strategically marketing ourselves as a profession, a career profession. And, that causes some challenges for human resources professionals across the country. Long-term employment is viewed a little bit differently with the younger generation, the younger workforce that's also coming in. And we see that here with Ogden as well. There is, certainly there are finite financial resources. You don't have, there's only one pot of dollars and you have to make that work and you have to determine what the priorities are for the organization. But the other thing that happens is that, we live or we work in a kind of a thankless job, a thankless profession from time to time. And, public sector employees, sometimes they are viewed negatively. It might be because of their profession. And, there are a lot of options that public sector employees have. They can choose to work in the public sector. They could go work in the private sector as well. And so it's just some compounding challenges. So in addition to that, because these are just little areas that can compound into an organization, this is what the evolution of compensation has been looking like for the past 5 or 6 years, actually. And there's often a question that I'm asked by elected officials of why does it feel like we can never get ourselves caught up? And what I have on the screen here is exactly why you're not getting caught up. It feels like every time you're trying to get ahead, then something else keeps getting added to the stack, where you have that turnover. You have a third of the workforce that is age eligible to retire, and you're struggling to be able to backfill that all across the United States. You've had the pandemic that really did change the face of how employers and employees work. And a lot of employees just decided they were going to go elsewhere, or they were going to leave the workforce altogether. There were additional dollars that were put into the economy, and that really did it either further enhanced what was happening in the private sector, or it revitalized what was happening in the private sector. And what happened then was that everyone started biting for the very limited human capital that you had. And there were, there are currently organizations that struggle with your trained, talented workforce being poached, because there's limited financial resources, and you think about all of the time that it takes to train. Would you rather bring in somebody who has that training and then you can just get them up and running? This is the way that we do it in Ogden, and away they go. And so, that has been a significant issue for employers. And now last but not least is inflation. And when I talk about inflation, there's often a question about, well, is inflation really changing our wages? Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not an economist. But what I can tell you is that the dollar feels a little less flexible to your employees, and it doesn't stretch as far as it used to. And so they're looking at their paychecks and trying to determine, can we afford to be here? Can I afford to do this without having to have a second job? And, you don't want to be an employer that is in a situation where the employees just can't afford to work there anymore. So it just continues to compound. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I certainly hope that the market starts to calm down. Although I will tell you, and you probably already know this, you are in a very competitive market in the Salt Lake region. So now let's take a look at everything a little bit closer to home, and specifically what's happening in Ogden. And what you see on the screen in front of you is the demographics of your employees. I sorted them by their age and also by their years of service, so that you can understand, all right, well, this is what we have, and that helps us understand what it is that we need in terms of a compensation structure. What we found is that your overall tenure in the organization is about 8.2 years. It's a little bit above average, which is a very positive thing. But also, when you want to consider with the left-hand side graph, you have some real high tenure in the 50-year-olds and the 60-year-olds. And what's going to happen is those individuals are going to get ready to retire. And when they do, you want to thank them for their service, and you want them to go ahead and start the rest of, what the next chapter of their life. And so when those people go, you can't really stop them from going. You have about 26% of your workforce that is in that particular area, which means that you're going to lose about 1 in 4 over the next decade, just purely to retirement. And then the city is going to be in a position to have to backfill that. Okay. That does not include just regular separations. We'll talk about that here in a little moment. But the other thing that's really interesting is when you take a look at those individuals who are under the age of 40, you have 50% of your workforce that is in this age category, which is a pretty big number. This is your very mobile workforce. They are not necessarily committed to the organization. they will go work elsewhere if they feel that they are a better match, or if they're going to get paid a little bit more money for the same type of work that they do. And the fact that you have 50% of your workforce in this category means that there really does need to be a focus on not only recruitment for those retirements that you know are going to be happening, but also retention for the current workforce that you have, because that is going to be the future workforce for you. As you have people that retire, they are the ones that are going to be next in line for succession planning.
Melina,
Yes.
question. When we look at the demographics and those percentages, is that pretty equal across all departments? Do we see that in police and fire maybe heavier, or I mean, are we just looking at it as a whole, or do we look at it by department and is it equal?
I looked at it as a whole. I did not break it down by department, but
Okay.
that is something that this is not a very difficult demographic review. And actually, I can share the spreadsheet with Heather, and she can do a little bit further analysis if you wish.
I would like to see that. That'd be great. Thank you.
So the other thing that we have to take a look at and consider is your actual turnover and how you have been losing employees. And this is information that has been provided from your human resources staff. And it lists out the last several years and the total separations. We would consider a 10% turnover rate to be a healthy number. We know turnover is going to happen. Sometimes it's welcome, but you always want to have new, fresh ideas within an organization. So 0 turnover is not usually a good thing, but you want to make sure that you've got that balance. The city has been a little bit over the average. You can see that you are between 11.46%, and I think your highest year was just under 15%. But what's really interesting here is the average service level for those individuals, and you can see that the tenure of those folks, they're declining as they leave. And there's some additional information where I did a look back, and you lose about a third of your workforce in the first year. You're not holding on to them very long. So because of that, then I looked out, all right, well, what's happening at 2 years? You're losing 42% of your new hires in the first 2 years of employment. And what's happening there is you're putting a lot of time and training into it. You've got a lot of HR resource going into the recruiting. You've got all of your department managers that are part of the recruiting process. You're purchasing equipment. You are purchasing uniforms. You're doing training. And it all adds up. And so you're expending dollars with that turnover. You're expending it in specific line items. And one of the considerations that we have is for organizations with turnover issues like that, can we help fix your model to get you more competitive so that you can redirect perhaps some of those dollars into the line items to help pay for competitive market wages. Competitive market wages ends up being the single biggest when you think about all of the tools in the toolbox, it is the number one item that you have available to you for the purposes of recruitment and retention. So now let's talk very quickly about compensation philosophy and what that means to an organization. And then I'm going to share with you what we found in our market findings for your organization. Compensation philosophy is also referred to as a compensation strategy. Where does your organization want to be within the comparable market? And what I recommend is that organizations establish a policy so that the body, the legislative body, makes this decision, and then it will be incumbent upon your administrative team to bring forward to you what it is that they're going to need to help keep the organization aligned with that compensation philosophy. So every organization really has 3 options. The first option is that you can lead the market, which means that you are going to be above average. You may not be necessarily the top payer, but you might be a little bit higher than the average to see if that will give you some sort of a competitive edge. You can also opt for the second option, which is that you can meet the average market. And that's what most organizations strive for. We have an entire data set. We try to put you right around the 50th percentile. And what that means is that some organizations are going to pay more than you. Some organizations are going to pay less than you. And we accept that that is going to be the case. And then there are other organizations that hit the third area, and that is that they cannot pay market competitive wages at all. Those organizations then they tend to have a little bit higher turnover. And then we have to take a look at what is that to cost to the organization with your payouts, your re-recruitment, your retraining, overtime coverage, you name it. When we look at that, oftentimes we will say that turnover is about 1.5 times the cost of that position when you add everything together. And so if you're option number 3, we really do want you to think, long and hard about that. You're not in that situation. You're not that organization. So when I had the data set and I was ready to start building the recommendations, I had a conversation with the city along the way about, all right, well, where are you at in terms of philosophy? And it's my understanding that your historical philosophy has been average. And that is what we have started here for you. All of the updates will align you to the average of the market. And then there can be a conversation in the future of, is that going to be strong enough? You are in a competitive market, hands down. You can't doubt that. And is average going to be strong enough for you, or do we need to elevate up those ranges a little bit more in order for you maybe to have a little bit of a cutting edge over your comparable organizations? And you might ask, I probably should have took these out of order. You might ask, when I talk about the comparable market, who do I mean? And this is a list of the comparable organizations at the public side that we utilized. We collected their market data. We ran a full analysis. So they are going to be, very specific organizations that are within your region. And then we also have some additional authorities or, just specialty districts that were specific to certain positions. So with that in mind, I'm going to kind of skip back here again. Let's talk a little bit about our methodology of what we did, and then we're going to go into the market findings and recommendations. So when we started this project several months ago, I met with your human resources, your administration team, and then I met with every individual department so that I could understand what programs, services, operations are they performing? And then we went into some detail about your positions and what those positions were responsible to do. From that conversation, then I asked for specific positions to complete what's called a position questionnaire. We made sure that we had one from every job title or every job classification within each department. And if we determined that maybe there was a shared classification or job title, but differing duties, we asked for additional documents to be completed. We do that so that we can run what's called a position analysis. We get a little bit more information about what those positions really truly are responsible to do. Is there some positions that are more similar, or maybe they're more dissimilar than how the city has been organizing them in a classification structure? We also then went out to the public comparables, that listing. We collected the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum so that we could understand the salary ranges of those organizations against your salary ranges for your positions. We also collected a 4th data point. Not everybody does, but McGrath is a believer in this, and that is what your incumbent rates, or what those organizations' incumbent rates, are being paid. And this is important because it really truly is it's very reflective of the current market right now. You can have salary ranges, but that does not necessarily mean that your organization is following them. And a good example of that we see right now is in PEs, in engineers. And you might have a salary range, but perhaps those PEs are being paid at the very, very top. And that would be an indication then that those salary ranges in the market probably are not market competitive anymore if everyone is being paid at the top. When we were done with all of those recommendations, or we built those, then I did meet with, I met with human resources. We spent time going over all of those recommendations. And then your human resources director met with all of the departments to talk through those recommendations. And then I was involved as needed for individualized conversations. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what we found in the market. What we do is, like I said, we collect multiple different data points for each position, and then we analyze each of those data points for all of your positions, and you have quite a number of them. So it's a pretty extensive data set. And what we want to see is for your organization to be aligned with the comparable organization. We call that a comp ratio or a comparison ratio. And the closer that number is to 50, that means that you are closer to what the average market is paying. So if we found someone's paying $20 an hour for a position and Ogden is paying $20 an hour, then we would identify that to be market competitive, average to the market, and that's going to have a comp ratio of 50. If your comp ratio is 50 or above, we consider that to be market competitive. But if you're at 44 or below, it's too far under the market to be deemed competitive. There's another area. It is 45 to 49. I have those color coded. Typically, when I'm meeting with elected officials, I would say, yes, that by our standard, it's market competitive. But given your work and or not, your market right now, some of those positions may not be market competitive, which is why I have labeled them to be at risk. Overall, what we found, big picture, is that your positions are pretty split in terms of market competitive or non-market competitive. So this is what you look like at your minimums. We found that about half are too far under the market to be competitive. And then the other half of them, they're doing okay, except you got 15% of them that really are on the bubble that we had to take a closer look at to make sure that we have them properly placed. Then now take a look at the trend. This is what you find with your midpoint. You're going to find that you have 41% under the market, and a lot more of those positions are at risk. And then your maximum here, we found in total, you've got about 37% of your positions that are not quite to the market. You have a very large spread, and that has something to do with that. But the challenge that you have then is that you've got at least half, if not more, of your positions that are not market competitive within the salary structure. And how do we fix that? Before I can talk about
Melina,
that.
can I just interrupt for a second? And can
Sure.
you differentiate those two graphs for me, the maximum and then the one prior midpoint?
Midpoint.
So I'm not sure what those are telling me.
Thank you. Okay, so your salary range, you have a range model, which means that you have a minimum and a maximum, but you also have a midpoint. Midpoint is going to be halfway through that. Now, typically what happens is that the midpoint is considered the average market. It becomes what I call the sweet spot. So the closer you are to that midpoint, the more likely you are to be a market competitive position. Okay. And normally what will happen when a schedule is developed, they develop it off of that midpoint simply because there's a lot of deviation and change that happens at minimums, but the midpoint really truly is what that average market rate is. So that's why I analyzed that number for you. Okay. The next one is the maximum. So it's the top end of your model. Yep, exactly. So one of the challenges that you have, and actually this segues nicely into what your current system looks like, you have a range structure. You've got 50% spread between your minimum to your maximum. Okay. And so that makes that your midpoint is at 25% spread in. Okay. So what that means for your folks is that if you were to bring someone in at the minimum, okay, they may not be experienced, and so you didn't feel like you could bring them in any higher than that, you bring them in at the minimum, then they have to progress through that range 25% approximately just to get to the midpoint, and then they have additional space within the range after that. What we're finding is that 50% spreads, they're nice because you've got usually a pretty nice number at the maximum, but they're so wide that it takes employees too long to get to a real true competitive number within that range. And so what we're finding in the market right now is that as wages are going up, we're starting to see some shrinkage of those ranges to kind of help contain those wages to be a little bit more succinct to what the market findings are. Okay. So the other thing that you have that's important for you as we walk into the recommendations is you have 39 pay grades. That means you have 39 different salary ranges for all of the classifications that you have at the city. And there's a 4% separation between each of those pay grades. Now, if you and I had been having this conversation maybe about 6 years ago, I wouldn't even be questioning that 4% separation. But what's happening today is that there's getting to be too much compression. There's not enough separation in those pay grades. So as you have individuals who are, promoting up to a higher position, it's less financially meaningful to them to be able to do that. And really there starts to be a question of really what's the difference between some of these pay grades, because there's such a de minimis difference in their dollars that, if you wanted to move someone to a 7 or an 8, it might be insignificant. So what you're going to find in the recommendations here is that we have collapsed down the number of pay grades. There are actually less of them for the positions with more space in between to make it a more meaningful change if we change pay grades. And then of course you have the 50% spread. Now, the other thing that you have here is you have a step model for your public safety. So your general model is a range and your public safety is a more structured step model. A little bit of some variation going on. You have two different models. One is going to be for police. The other is for fire. The number of steps is directly tied to the rank of the position. And as you're growing in rank, you have fewer steps, and that is because of compression, okay? And compression is a real factor here. And when you see the recommendations, you're going to see that compression continues to be a factor, just simply because you've got the wages of your ranks, but then you have a max, you have a cap, and that cap is with your chief and assistant chief positions. So the other part of that is important as you walk into the recommendations is that the step percentage, as those employees are progressing, the percentage of step deviates. It's somewhere between 3 and 7%. It's been inconsistent historically, probably as the city has been making changes to the model to try to keep up with the market, the percentage has simply changed. And this is the opportunity to just do a clear reset so that every employee who is stepping is getting the same percentage, and that is more equitable to all of the employees. So that's what we have in terms of your current model. Now let's talk about your recommendations. The first and foremost is that your models have been built to the average market, and that's important not only for the elected body here as you're making decisions, but it's also important information for your employees, because your employees could come in and say, I could still go make XYZ dollars at this other organization. And the response to that is, yes, and that is because we aligned to the organization to the average, and we know that some organizations are still going to pay more than Ogden. We did not make you the highest paying organization within the market. We've built a range model for your general employees. There are less pay grades. There are 23 pay grades instead of 39, with between 7 and 10% separation between those grades to make those adjustments more meaningful. We have shrunk down your ranges from 50% down to 45%. I will say that because you are in an extremely competitive market, if you feel like you need to push back out into the 50% again, up, push that maximum out, I don't think that it's going to be problematic. I set your control point at 20%. It's between the minimum to that midpoint. It's not really truly a midpoint, which is why I'm calling it a control point. I've closed the gap that employees need to try to get through to get to that sweet spot in that salary range, because we want them to progress through to get to that number faster. The faster they can, the more likely you are to hold on to them, because that really truly is, what the going rate for those positions are. Does that make sense? In addition to that, we continued the step model for your police and fire. We did not change that. We were able to add some additional steps. We do continue to have compression amongst the ranks. There really is no stopping that unless we were to say no steps at all, that there would be some ranks that would have a singular rate, and that would be that. And I believe that, compression is, can be managed with some policy items. And I would imagine that Human Resources and Administration will be back to talk about those at a later time. We did change then the percentage of step to 4%. So that across the board, everyone who is stepping is getting the same percentage. Okay, there are some other recommendations, and I understand that this has been a conversation in some of the more recent meetings, and that is because I am recommending some classification structure changes. And classifications is how you label or you title your positions, and to move away from the manager designations and to move towards the director designations. Now, you have a complex organizational structure because you have two levels of those, of what I would call directors. You've got the executive directors. Sometimes we also call those managing directors, depending upon the organization. And then you have your directors, which would be division directors. And right now they are labeled managers. For the purposes of recruitment and retention, it is my recommendation that the organization migrate over to strictly directors and then assistant directors. You'll have managers and supervisors that will help support the organization internally. And then we have administrators and coordinators underneath that. You will also see that some of the classifications have been collapsed, where you used to have levels and they no longer are there because we identified that there's really not a change in those responsibilities. But you'll also find that we have new levels that have been developed, and there will likely be some additional work that's going to be needed between the department and human resources, just so that employees understand, what the qualifiers are going to be for those differing levels. So those are yet to be finalized and certainly subject to the budget process. The last item then, just very quickly, before we get into how you manage your model going forward, is position placements, because oftentimes we are asked the question of how is it that you place the positions where you did? And, this is a really complicated question because we look at every individual position. And there are 4 factors that we have to take a look at. The first one is what the market is telling us. It's very heavily market driven at this point. And if an organization does not use this, then you're going to have worse recruitment and retention concerns. We take a look at the position questionnaire, that position analysis. What did they tell us that their responsibilities are? We look at internal comparability. There might be some similar positions across departments, and they might have maybe a little bit of a deviation in their market, but we determine we're going to align them to the same. And then you have your compression factor. How much separation do you need between your ranks? How much separation do you need between subordinate staff and supervisors? And that's not just in police and fire. That does occur in many departments. So with that, my final recommendations for you to consider is what you do to manage the system going forward, because there's been a lot of time, a lot of resource that has been put into updating your model so that all of your salary ranges now are going to be aligned against the average market. But there's always this question of, okay, well, the market has gone up very quickly. We've had a couple of really challenging CPI years. Is that why our ranges fell behind? And, that I think is part of the reasons, but part of the other issue that you have is that the organization has not been applying what we would call an economic adjustment onto the salary ranges. So what happens is if what we've done is we've established Ogden to be at the 50th percentile of your market. And as your market goes up, okay, and Ogden is seeing here, you start to lose ground and you're no longer aligned at the average, which is why we found so many, at least half of your positions, if not more, to be under the market at this point. So my recommendation to the organization is you're going to take that entire model and you're going to apply an economic indicator, an economic adjustment, whether you call it a cost of living or whatever you are going to call it each year, so that you are going to continue to keep in that same competitive placement that we put you in now against all of your comparators going forward. But then you still need to have the mechanism for the employees to be able to progress through the ranges. Right now, your police officers and your firefighters, they have the step model, which means that when they hit their anniversaries, they have a natural progression. But your general employees, they do not have that mechanism. And so not only do we need the cost of living onto the range for the employees to also receive, but there needs to be some sort of a mechanism for them to be able to progress through, which would be normally, merit, pay for performance of nature. And if you miss one of those, then you're going to either struggle with maintaining against the market, or your employees will struggle and they're going to feel that they're not valued, and then they're going to go work somewhere else. There's a balance that has to happen when you're looking at both an economic adjustment plus an internal annual adjustment. And a lot of organizations say we're not necessarily going to hit CPI. We're not going to match it percentage for percentage. And that, for the most part, generally speaking, is okay. As long as an organization, you commit to saying, we're going to take a look at the market every few years to make sure that if we have to make an adjustment, we're doing it in a reasonable amount of time so that we don't cause any of our salary ranges to go awry. So one of our recommendations that we have is do a market update. Now, it doesn't have to be, it's not going to be as extensive as what we did here, but do a market update in 3 years and have your human resources staff follow the metrics, because there is some real there's some real data that it can help you determine, are you ready for a market update earlier? Can you push it back a year? Do we, what is the strength in the organization in terms of average to the market? Is it working? Is it not working? You will have those numbers available to you so that you can start having some strategic conversations and making some strategic decisions going forward. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Wow.
I know, I'm sorry.
I grew up in the upper Midwest, and we referred to people from Minnesota as speaking at about 500 words a minute and gusting to 1,000.
That would be me. Sorry. I'm from Wisconsin. Go Pack, go.
Where from?
Wisconsin.
Where?
Eau Claire.
I'm a Blue Gold.
Hey.
Eau Claire Memorial High School.
There
You?
go.
You didn't go to North, did you?
I did not go to North.
Go to
No,
Regis?
I actually, I'm Colfax is where I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Very
good.
It's kind of like everybody in Clearfield says, Ogden.
Right.
So in the last 30 years in Utah, I've got a chart before me that says our highest unemployment rate was about 8%, and currently we're under 3%. So if we're looking to stem turnover and the training costs and the recruiting costs associated with it, which are real factors in the cost of bringing people on, in a tight labor market like this, are we going to see any less job hopping than we're seeing now? Are we going to get from that 12% turnover in this most recent year down to 10% or not? It's tough.
It's tough. I don't have the crystal ball. I would love to say yes, but I can't predict that for you. What I can tell you is that your ranges are going to be aligned to the average market. And if you don't see improvement in the metrics, that would be a clear indication then, because your ranges are not behind in the market now. It would be a clear indication, do we have to poise you higher? Do we have to push that needle up further so that we're hot? Maybe we're going to be aligning you at the 60th percentile or the 70th percentile, where we're going to try to give you some like a strategic edge against your comparators. It doesn't bring in the human capital. You're still going to be fighting for the same number of individuals who are available to work. And then there is this additional challenge that you have where some of your positions can be trained on the job, Others cannot. You're looking for a very, very specific
Educated.
skill. And that becomes much more difficult then, because how far out are you looking for that human capital? It's not unheard of, to do national searches at this point for some very, very specialized positions. And then all of a sudden you're competing against the nation. Now, that is not a recommendation for me. I do not suggest that you set your wages to the national average. That would not be, I would never recommend that. But, there may be some of those exceptional situations that might continue to happen for Ogden.
Okay, so, thanks. And then our comparators are all in the public sector, are they?
I will say though, that when I met with the departments, we talked about the private sector and, where they are losing their human capital to. We did go out to those organizations to try to understand what their compensation is. We do have private sector, data. We did not combine it to, render our recommendations. It was more just so that we could understand what's happening in the private sector, simply because the data comes in a little bit differently than it does in the
Right,
public
right.
sector.
But we could lose, I mean,
Yes.
they're a lot more flexible as far as raise prices
They are.
and increase wages
Yes.
with an increased price. And we're somewhat limited
You are.
as a public entity
Correct.
in our ability to do that as flexibly as private sector people can. And then Heather made a comment a couple of weeks ago when we were in here and highlighted a demographic that's 25 and younger. And that group being and I'm curious as to whether we know how big that population is, 25 and less. Heather had said that a lot of this group is covered, they don't appreciate the health benefit because they're covered by their parents. And as soon as they got $2 more an hour, they're gone.
Yep.
So if it's a significant population, do you have any experience in providing some alternative spiffs that will keep them here? A ski pass, something that can be, that's of value, that will hold them, that
Yep.
can be pulled if they go.
Yep. And so we did not study your benefits in this project. We only looked at your wages. But what you are talking about is what we call the total rewards experience. Okay. So we're looking at wages and benefits. You look at your well-being. How are you taking care of your folks? Because that's really important these days. We're looking at the professional development opportunities that you have for your employees. And then we're also looking for the recognition. And do your employees feel valued by the organization? And that makes up the total experience of an employee. We looked at just one of those tentacles. We as consultants, though, we continue to do our continuing education as well. And I spent 3 days with private entities, and all we talked about was benefits and what they are doing, because what happens in the private sector is going to be here in the public sector within about 24 months. And what's happening is individualization of benefits and the flexibility of the benefit. So being able to choose, because my needs as a 25-year-old are significantly different than the needs of someone who is 55. And then the organization needs to make sure that they have enough flexibility in their benefits to be able to take care of and offer benefits to both of those groups. And that is, you have a wonderful HR director, and I'm sure that she'll be she'll be looking at that in the future for you.
All right.
It's a thing.
Thanks for all of that. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Yeah, I've
Councilmember
got a couple
Myers.
questions too. So, you mentioned, and you kind of answered this question with your rewards. Let's see, you called it total rewards benefits. So you kind of answered some of my question as you talked to Councilman Graff about this, but what are some of the other factors that relate to high job satisfaction? That's not part of your study at all. That's that rewards package.
Yes, we don't look at that. We looked at purely the compensation only, but yes, the satisfaction and the engagement of employees, that I can't say that that's not a factor. It is not number one right now.
Right.
Okay. So, when you look at surveys, employee surveys, and they ask, what's most important to them, I mean, right now it's number one is wages, number two is benefits, and every once in a while that flips. But every once in a while, and normally level number 3 and 4 is going to be flexibility. And do I feel valued by the organization? And do I understand what my role is strategically to, to make, what am I supposed to be carrying out on behalf of the organization? Those rate very, very high to a lot of the workforce.
So to me, it would be interesting to see how we rate
Yes.
in that, so I don't know if that's a survey or what, and I don't know if that's a recommendation or a thought, and you might already be on top of that, Heather, but I just don't know, but it's.
Yeah, we have a wage and benefits committee that we actually talk about some of these initiatives of fringe benefits, some of these other, job satisfaction surveys that we want to send out. So we do have discussions about that. We haven't implemented anything yet because our focus right now is the compensation study, but I think later down the road, yes, it is a huge component that we are interested in. And we've talked about stay interviews of why the individuals stay with our organization, of why, you can make X amount of dollars elsewhere, but why do you want to stay for Ogden? Because I have a specific reason of why I stay for Ogden, but it may be from differing, viewpoints for what position they hold. So yeah, we just putting out fires left and right. So once we can get our feet stable, then yes, I would love to have these type of initiatives set out.
So this may not pertain to your study either, but to me, in private industry, if I bring somebody in from out of town, they'll accept the job, they'll accept the salary, they were excited about it, and then they find out our housing costs here in our community are a little bit higher in the metropolitan area along the Wasatch Front. So how does that factor into salary for out of town people and for those of our employees who just want to live and stay and work here in Ogden, Weber County?
It's very much a real issue for the geographies that are impacted, and certainly the Wasatch Front is one of them. It is a consideration that either you look at, are there some programs that you can develop to help your employees in terms of getting home loans or whatnot, and that could be a compelling reason why you say, all right, well, we've established this at average. What would it take to get us to a higher level so that we can help with that cost of living or that housing cost? We don't determine that. That would be something that you as an organization would want to have discussions and say, all right, does that impact? Should we make an adjustment to our compensation philosophy because that's a real issue in our community?
All
Thank
right.
you.
Councilmember Blair, okay. Just a couple of questions I had. So when we do these compensation studies, it's always based on the data we have, which in some cases, is it the most current data or is it a year old, 2 years old? And so are we, by implementing this, already behind like we've seen in the past? How would you respond to that?
Yep. So when we started the project in August of last year, then we did a fourth quarter data draw, and we go out and we collect so real-time data. So depending upon when those organizations are renewing their wages, right? And I would imagine that most of them are probably going to be cyclical at the same time as you. All of those organizations now, are they putting cost of living adjustments onto their salary ranges? Highly likely that they are. And so, yes, what that would mean for your organization is if the world around you is going up, then that is not included in these salary ranges.
Okay. All right. That's a good. And then as far as the titles, that's it's interesting. Is that something we're seeing in cities across the area, or those changes, or is this more in line with the private sector, or what's the trend?
So we are seeing across the nation more directors directors, managers, supervisors, and then you're going to have perhaps different levels within that. That's, we would consider that a best practice at this point. When we collect the market data, we also are paying attention to, what other entities are calling those positions. But we want to do a further review to say, all right, well, we might be a manager in that organization, but are they, do they have the same level of responsibility, liability, strategic planning, budgeting, supervision, all of those areas that we take a look at, and are they similar, so that we aren't necessarily looking at, we want to make sure that we're aligning correct position to correct position.
Sure.
And what we are finding is that there are more directors now, or division directors at that level within your market than there will be managers. I'm not going to say that there's no managers. There are, but
Right.
the majority are going to be directors at this point.
So there is that trend moving
Yes.
towards those titles then.
Yes.
Okay. Last question is, I'm looking around the room, we see a number of directors and folks here, and I don't know if it's okay to ask how they feel about the market study and if it's going to address some of the challenges they're facing. So I don't know if anybody would like to jump up and yeah, Chief Young, sure, yeah.
Just don't elbow your way as you come
Yeah.
up there.
No, I appreciate you offering Councilman Ritchie or Councilperson Ritchie, because it's an important critical issue to all of us, all the board directors here and all those who are not able to be here. And this is very, very important in my department that we get this done. It's just a transitory workforce these days, and that's just the reality of it. And we have a great culture. I came and I talked to all of you in my year-end update about the kind of culture we've created in our department, how we're bringing sergeants, people who are sergeants in other organizations are coming into our organization to be patrolmen because they like the culture. But that's this percentage of the whole group, and the whole group is just looking at what's out there all the time, and they're just doing this comparison. So being average is what's critical in my organization, because our culture will carry us through, the ups and downs that other agencies see, but making sure at least being competitive in the market for our sworn and our civilians. This is, I have a lot of general employees that this affects as well. And I think you made a great point, and it's one that I would echo on, is that this is getting us up to where we were either for some of those county agencies that were in that. You saw a couple of county agencies that were comparable. Their budget years would have changed December, January of last year, and they would have already implemented. And everybody's having to make changes to keep up. And then others will be implementing changes
Throughout this year.
in July 1st. And so, yeah,
Right.
we do go on this potentially even a little bit behind where we need to be. So,
Okay.
yeah. Any
But you do
questions?
feel like this does, particularly in that 1 to 5 year, that turnover in those higher years, is this something that you feel like can get us maybe better retention?
I do.
Okay.
I do. And I greatly appreciate the fact that we focus so heavily on the data, because it's easier for me to go back and talk to my people and not talk from emotion, or, we have all kinds of people who do great jobs, and I appreciate that, but this is being driven by what the market data says. And so that gives us a good crutch to rest on when we're giving good news or bad news. This doesn't, and to be clear, this doesn't affect everybody in my organization really well. Some
Right.
people were already doing where they needed to be, but for those that needed it, it's a big win.
Chief Young, how aware are your employees of these salary ranges? I mean, we discuss them openly in council meetings and work sessions. So is that pretty common knowledge or public knowledge? Do you share that?
Yeah, it is. And it's credit to to mayor and the mayor. We always make sure that our employees aren't being given information in this meeting. We want to make sure they get at least ahead. We let them know what's being proposed, and we want to make sure they understand, this is proposed. The council's looking at this, but this is what's being proposed. So within the last 2 weeks, we've been having these meetings with our employees for our sworn, and then just most recently in the last couple of days with our general employees. And so, and I get little emails or notes left on my desk throughout the year. Hey, here's what so-and-so agency just did. And you know what, the great thing, and I want to compliment them. I didn't this morning, that those studies of what the incumbents are actually earning really are critical in our world right now, because we've seen recently a couple of really outrageous recruiting numbers that you would have found the incumbents weren't actually getting what they're marketing. So having that incumbent data really helps level the playing field.
Thank you, Chief. I don't know if any other directors have anything else they'd like to add, or if there's anything else you feel like we as a council ought to be aware of with regard to this study that would be helpful.
Thank you, council member. Similarly to what Eric is saying, I think it's really important to understand what you're doing or considering it from the recommendation is very much appreciated. very much warranted for our employees because we've known we've been in trouble for some time as one of the factors that is really impacting our ability to retain. But more importantly, what you brought up is significantly important too, because after the newness of this wears off, the unions, the laborers will go out and do more comparisons. And those agencies that were listed up there that have been compared to will have made other adjustments, whether it be on a calendar year or a fiscal year. And they'll look at those situations again. They'll look at the compensation and make a comparison, and then they'll make their value judgment about whether they're going to jump ship based on what the difference they can make. So I think it's important to recognize that we lose a year in a year that we make this kind of adjustment. Secondarily is that we've been fighting to get out of this for a number of years. I've had the fortunate situation to be the chief for quite some time here and remember the days when compensation was not an issue that drove people away so much. It just wasn't that big of a deal. The world's gotten much smaller. It's much easier for a firefighter, police officer to work anywhere along the Wasatch Front. So that's the market. And I think the other thing that was mentioned about customizing benefits is a very big thing, but I think our benefits compare above average, I would say, than what have other government entities pay. But I think one of the reasons for that is because we've been so far behind in compensation. Some of these reward programs are nice, but what I've seen when we've done and tried to do things have been tricks to try to disguise the fact that we don't have a compensation schedule that is paying people market wages. So we're trying to make up for it with other means, and I just don't think that works. I'd ask the consultant as well, is that when you mention the comparison, the items that one looks at when it comes to total compensation, total reward, do they move on to benefits if the compensation is poor? Or do they look at benefits and say, well, the benefits is rich, so that makes up for compensation? Do the rewards make up for compensation? I would suggest they don't. If we don't get to market on compensation, we can't get past that piece and move on to benefits and other factors and well-being and everything else. Because if they're not making a market wage, they'll just leave. And it's very difficult to have a conversation with an employee that says, I can leave and go to X employer and it's life altering. I'm making $800 more a month. I'm making $1,000 more a month. It makes a big difference in my personal situation. And I can't have a further conversation with him because there's nothing I can do. I have to tell him, I agree with you. Unfortunately, it is in your best interest personally to do what you're going to do because I can't match that. I wish I could, but I couldn't. So anything you can do in this area will hopefully help alleviate the issue with the difficulties we're having with retaining people. We already know we're a very busy organization and we demand a lot of our employees. We need and must pay them a market wage to keep them here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for letting us put you on the spot like that.
Yeah, no problem. So if you look at the turnover rates, I think public services over the last 3 years have hit around 16.5 to 17.5% consistently. And what we're facing is we have a lot of entry-level employees that come and show up. They get a lot of opportunity to learn a lot of things quickly, and they realize that they can go somewhere else and with the skills that they've learned in a short amount of time and make a lot more money to different agencies. And so what's happening is we're slowly having employees that are tenured here as they retire. And we've got a big gap now in public services where our blue collar employees, we've got a lot of tenured employees and we've got a lot of employees that are super young, and that middle age group of employees is quickly decreasing. And that's a little scary from the fact that now we're going to have that group where you want them to be able to take over for that tenured group where you're losing that group. And so I believe this compensation will help retain those entry-level employees and give them an opportunity to progress so that we can hopefully quickly alleviate that gap. And also give us a chance to go and recruit from others that might be looking to fill in that gap. In that, that 7 to 15 year tenured employee. So I know we have a lot of employees that are wanting to get excited about this. They're waiting patiently. But yeah, they are looking forward to knowing what's going to happen with the compensation study, and they've been patient. So we appreciate that.
While you're seated there, Justin, one of the questions that was asked was about titles and changes of titles. Do you have title changes proposed within your area of responsibility?
Yeah, in fact, there are quite a few in our area. Now, most of ours, I think, are pretty common sense title changes, and I feel like they align more with division to division, like having equipment operators 1 or equipment operator 2. And so if you know where you're at in one division, it aligns with the other division. So I don't think that's going to be an issue for my department.
Okay, that, when you do a little search on job title evolution, what comes up is title inflation, where a bank teller is no longer a bank teller, they're an associate banker. Well, they really aren't, they're a teller. Some of this stuff has kind of been elevated to a point where even the employee knows, I'm not an associate banker. In this particular instance, is this being thoughtful enough that we aren't creating hollow titles for people that just discount them, knowing that this is beyond my scope? Is
No.
what I'm worried about.
I don't think so. Especially with our blue collar employees, I think it's pretty straightforward in understanding that. Now, I will give an example that in talking to our recreation manager through the title changes, and the example he gave me is actually going to out for some training and going to this training, and they forming some groups, and they were all sharing kind of titles, where he shared his title as being a manager. And he said, I almost felt discounted a little bit from the other titles within the group I was at. But then when they got talking about, the stuff they're involved with, he said, I quickly realized I actually do a lot more than what these other people with maybe a different title were doing, a director title. So he goes, sometimes that, in going and around to, to these different trainings and such, it's kind of eye-opening to kind of see what shifts have already taken place.
Thanks.
Melina, I don't know if you want to address that as well, if you've seen, I have any input on that question as well.
So when we, to the associate banker, what would be important is what are the responsibilities of that associate banker, so that we know are they a customer service representative? Are they really truly an associate banker? Are they a loan officer? Are they a teller? And so, that's part of our process, is to, understand what, go beyond the title and what their responsibilities are. One of our recommendations on the classifications is to align your responsibilities to what we would consider the best practices. And I always think about, I'm 20 years HR before I started working in compensation and benefits. And, a lot of that time was spent doing recruitments. And when you're putting out an ad, when you're posting a position, you want to make sure that you're capturing the immediate attention, which is the heading of that job announcement of what you're looking for. Because, and I'm going to use your HR person who's right next to me. Thank you for being my example. If you're hiring for an HR manager or an HR director, someone might say, been there, done that. I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to go from a director to a manager, when in all actuality, the responsibilities of your manager is being a division director, is responsible for all aspects of HR, like other organizations would be an HR director. And you have the potential that people are not going to pay attention to that. So we certainly, that is probably more important to make sure that you're recruiting for what you're hiring for and that there is that recognition so that you're with those counterparts. And I think maybe even, the chiefs might even talk about that if you're involved with, some organizations and you want to go to classes, sometimes you have to be of a very specific title in order to get into those classes. And if you are of anything other than a chief or a deputy chief, they're not going to consider you, even though you might have those responsibilities. If you don't hold that title, they're not going to consider you. So there's a lot of professional reasons why we want to do this for you.
Thank you. Other question?
Yeah, thanks. So as we've been educated on this as a city council for the last 2 months, and it's pretty fascinating. Kudos to our administrative staff, to Heather and Justin, for a great job. And to me, it appears that we've already made all the adjustments. We've set forth all the scales, pay scales, the salary ranges and things like that. Have you had a chance to review that, Melinda, or were you involved in that process as those pay grades have kind of been implemented to Ogden City, or are we just following recommendations that?
I'm not sure that I'm understanding the question. Yeah.
So the salary schedules that we put in the packet and everything were
Yes.
the recommendations from McGrath. We didn't make any adjustments. She sent us the data, and then we haven't implemented it yet because we're waiting for approval and whatnot. So staff do know the proposal of the salary structure and everything, but that came directly from McGrath. We didn't make any tweaks. We didn't make any changes. We had conversations about it with each department director to make sure that they were on board with it. And then if we had any suggestions, we came back to Melina, but we did not adjust any of the salary schedules.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
And then one last thing from me. You had mentioned it's important that we float in the direction that keeps us competitive, and that there might be an indicator in the economy that we kind of hitch our wagon to pull us along, to keep us competitive. I'm not sure if I heard exactly what indicator you suggest, or is there a common one that are being used by those we were compared to as we went through this study?
So you have a couple of options. You can certainly use the CPI, and that is, it's a national number. They have CPIs that are going to be Western region for you specifically. So, you can rely on that number. I will say that organizations that use the CPI may not always follow it to a T. We are seeing that organizations might trend it for over a period of 3 years or 5 years to kind of massage it so that maybe there is some not like an 8% that you had last year, maybe not be 8%, but it's going to be a lower percent for a number of additional years. The other, so that's an option. The other option that you have, and it seems kind of silly, but it works pretty effectively. You have that comparator group. That is the group that we use to collect the data, analyze it, and develop our recommendations. And your human resources department can reach out to them to find out what have you done to your salary ranges, and then do an analysis on that to determine, all right, we're not going to follow the CPI. We're going to actually get it right from our comparators, and we're going to make a determination on what our percentage needs to be so that we continue to be within about that 50th percentile for them. But the challenge with that is, and I say, you got to do it once a year, and you got to be consistent about when you do it and how you're doing it. Organizations do change their models throughout the year. And so it's not perfect, right? But that's why one of the recommendations is to do a market update every 3 years, so that if you are off a little bit, we can do the market adjustment. It's usually going to be a very modest adjustment, but it helps you realign yourself, and then you go for another 3 years.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Melina. Thank you, Heather.
Very good. Thank you for your time.
All righty. Up next, we'll invite David Sawyer to come and talk about the pay parking implementation plan.
Okay, I do just want to say, just as follow-up to our last conversation, I know we have we have a few high level positions within the CED department that we have in the past called managers, and they have special knowledge and skills that warrant that, but they don't manage staff. And so we've thought of them as being program managers as opposed to people managers. And so like a person that's in charge of recruitment, or a person that's in charge of other programs, it's important. And most of the people that we're recruiting for those positions are at the director or vice president or business management level. And so the proposal that's being put in front of us now, it would be to call those individuals supervisors or administrators. And so when you go back to that discussion about recruitment and posting of those positions, that would be a very difficult challenge for those filling those positions. We're probably not going to get the level if that's all they look at. The pay is okay, but it's the recruitment marketing that we'll have some challenges with. And so I'm hoping that we can adopt some flexibility in that regard so we can get the right positions filled with the caliber of individuals that we're looking for. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys about paid parking, our favorite topic. And so we've been talking about this for a number of years, and some of you have been involved in the nitty gritty of these discussions, and some of you have not. So I will go through this quickly, and I'll spend the most time on just where we're at in the process. But I do want to kind of go through the whole global overview real quick and see where that takes us, and see if you have any additional questions. First of all, the reason we start off with the Make Ogden and this slide here with Wonder Block and so forth is because it's kind of background to why we're even talking about messing with parking downtown. Okay, and so as we started discussing the Make Ogden program a few years back, and we had the public meetings, and we talked about the reason for Make Ogden and establishing the future for downtown and really transforming underutilized properties into properties that really help support the city's financial health and prosperity into the future, the next 25 years. We're in episode 1 of that right now, and you can see some of the key economic numbers that we're looking at, even in episode 1 on this slide. And Wonder Block is part of episode 1. And as we started talking about that, and we saw some of the public input, even to Make Ogden, one of the questions that we came up with, and I'm just getting ahead of myself here, but was, where's everybody going to park? You know, we're going to bring more residences downtown. We're going to increase retail trade. We're going to increase our visitor traffic, but where's everybody going to park? Because we know that in certain parts of town, it's very congested. So that's why we start off talking about some of this, and even before we start talking about parking. And let me give you some specific examples. This is a picture out the front window of a business on 25th Street, just a small business. And when I've had discussions with individual businesses in my role as the business development individual working for the city, I spent a lot of time over the last few years working with small businesses primarily, and then also some larger ones as well. And so one of the challenges that they have expressed to me is just the congested parking when they need it the most. And so on this next picture here, this individual, when I met with them, we looked at each one of the cars, and he says, now remember which of those cars are parked there, because when we finished talking in an hour or whatever, how long our meeting is, we were talking about promotional activities and ideas for his business. He said, I can almost guarantee you that, and this was in the 100 block of 25th Street, that all those cars will still be there. And he said, I have a takeout business. I need people to be turning over, and it's just not happening, and it's killing me. So what's the city going to do about that? And so we started talking a lot about that, and we knew that we have some current parking challenges across the downtown for our businesses. As we start to implement Make Ogden, that will accelerate and complicate the problems. And as I mentioned before, even some of our public comment was, where's everybody going to park? And so currently, if you were to go to the ninth floor and look out the window, or you were to go to the top of the junction parking garages and you look out over downtown, you would see in some parts of downtown, there are parking spaces. There's empty space. People go and park there. But it's not the case where the highest demands are. And so we know that all these issues will be aggravated by Make Ogden, which is a good problem. You're right. We're going to be increasing the overall economic activity in downtown. And so we initiated a parking study. We really wanted to quantify this. What's happening now, assess that, input into that, what our projected development plans were over the next few years and even the next decade or two. We hired a consultant that does this professionally across the country for other cities. And they specialize, the group of this consulting firm specializes in municipal parking systems. Some of them are paid, some of them are not. So they looked at our situation and assessed it. And as you might expect, they found that, and this map's a little difficult to read, but you can kind of look at the colors. But in the red areas, that's where they noticed that the parking was the most difficult, where it exceeded 85% of what they call effective capacity threshold, which means that when it gets to that level, visitors to the area tend to just drive on. They don't spend a lot of time searching for parking spaces because it just looks, they're overwhelmed by that. And so it negatively impacts the accessibility of businesses in particular and discourages visitors. And the study agreed, as we suspected it would, that the upcoming Make Ogden developments will overwhelm our existing parking capacity in the areas that we were targeting. So the study recommended that we should consider implementing a paid parking management system to address current and future parking needs. It included all the background benefits of a paid parking system, allowing us to efficiently manage the limited resources and increase the turnover within the most convenient and desirable parking spaces, generally on the street first, and then adding other off-street resources as well, and reduces construction or traffic congestion and the overall attractiveness to visitors. In most communities in the past where they've implemented paid parking, I've talked to some of the other communities and communicated with them. The initial reaction to introducing a paid parking program was, wow, that's going to hurt business, and it's going to discourage customers and employees and reduce our competitiveness as a community. However, most of the communities that have implemented paid parking, in fact, all of the ones that I've spoken to or communicated with, or that we received case histories from other cities, actually felt after the initial few months of disruption that paid parking actually enhanced retail business in particular. And we do know that across the country, almost all major cities have a paid parking system to help manage their parking resources. And also in smaller communities that have a tourist-friendly destination, such as the ones you see there on the slide, have also implemented a paid parking system to manage their busy visitor traffic. So we do know that based upon the experiences from other communities that have implemented a paid parking system, that it does actually benefit businesses in a number of ways, including providing a more reliable paid parking system, Um, it does help turn over people, and they tend to not stay in the same parking position for hours or half the day, which is even the most convenient spots. It creates a more vibrant and attractive downtown shopping areas due to the increased walkability and bikeability, and just an overall better and more attractive downtown as we're facilitating more residents and more people walking around and enjoying the downtown area. And so as I go back to and I think about some of the discussions we've had with businesses, one of them in particular, I remember last year, I started talking about parking. He said, well, before you start talking about parking, just tell me, are you guys really going to do the Wonder Block parking garage? And so I wasn't sure where he was going with that. So I said, why do you ask? What's your interest in that, or what are your thoughts on that? And he said, well, I hope you're going to do it because, and I didn't have a picture of his situation, but he's like, I am so excited about how that's going to, I'm really hoping that's going to eliminate the mess that's in front of my business. And I said, what do you mean mess? And he says, I have customers every day tell me they were going to stop yesterday for one of my products, and they just kept on going because it looked like I was way too busy. And I had nobody, yesterday morning, but all the parking spaces were full. So just another anecdotal story there, but I really think it speaks to what we're trying to achieve here. And so our proposed parking management plan is to start proactively managing our existing parking supplies and add new parking facilities, such as the Wonder Block parking structure, redoing the electric alley parking facility in the next few years as well, in order to address the existing challenges that we have and support the catalytic development that we refer to as Make Ogden and everything else that we're doing to try and increase our economic vitality downtown. So here's what that looks like. I have, if any of you are interested, I have printed copies of the parking map here that I'll leave here on the table. But our plan is to begin implementing the new parking system in the most high demand areas first, which is the areas in blue, beginning with a free app for the first few months and then converting to paid parking in early 25. So even within the blue areas, we see doing that in phases. So beginning with 25th Street and Kiesel as the busiest areas, and then later expanding through the balance of the blue areas in what we're calling phase one. Then over the next several years, expanding through phases 2 and 3. So you see the yellow areas to the north, and then the pink areas across Washington Boulevard,
David,
at least in the first block. Yes.
before you proceed, I'm not sure what electric alley is. I'm sorry. Can you just point where that's at on your map?
I asked the same question when I came to Ogden about 5 years ago and was told this incredible story. But anyway, that's for another discussion. But that is the big asphalt parking lot on the north side of 25th Street behind the businesses. So you have, where the Marriott is, the area there, the new Slackwater, the DMV or the Department of Motor Vehicles, what do we call that here? But anyway, so that whole 2-block area and the 1 and 200 block of 25th Street to the north, it's like an expanded alley that is used for parking now. There's I want to say about 420 parking spaces in those 2 blocks.
And that is owned by Ogden City?
It
primarily?
is. Mhm.
As you come down further to Wall Avenue, right behind Child Richards, the county
Yes, that's
office
where
right
it
there,
starts, on the west side.
is that proposed to go into paid parking as well, or will that be replaced by a building? Because I'm hearing a lot of different rumors.
So
about
in
that
the short term, in the latter part of phase 1, so not the first few months, but yes, that would convert to paid parking as well. And currently the city manages those parking spaces to some extent. We have permits that we issue to some of the businesses based upon their business licenses and how many employees they report that they have and so forth. And so it's kind of a big deal. And so the parking is very limited there. But so I'll talk a little bit more about alternatives for employee parking. But yeah, that's operated by the city and managed by the city right now.
And that's that's a huge issue to those business owners right through there that I just, anyway, I've been approached by several of them asking about what's going to happen with that. And the rumor that they hear is that the city's going to build something there. So
There's concepts that in the Community and Economic Development Department we've looked at over the last few years that include redoing Electric Alley to make that more efficient. If you look at trends across the country relative to downtown development, the trend is to eliminate large expanses of asphalt parking lots and try to leverage the value of that land in a better way. And so you tend to go up instead of just spread out parking. And so you either have tucked under parking under development or layers of parking like we have at Wonder Block, but not spread out because that's just a waste of valuable space. And so, and it also reduces pedestrian friendliness. And so, so the one idea, which we have, it's not even a project yet, we just had concepts, is to take Electric Alley and just make that more of a 2-lane byway, if you will, just a road. And then you would put potentially development on the north side of that with tuck under parking. But that's just a concept. And we're open to other ideas in that regard. But so that's out there. So
and then the paid parking in areas like that, like Electric Alley, would that be kind of like what they do in Park City where you just have the app? That's what you're talking about
Yep.
earlier, just the app parking. Okay.
Yep. And so, and the nice thing for Electric Alley now, I mean, it does provide us a backup parking for 25th Street, right? And so there's not enough parking spaces. And a lot of those businesses, particularly in the 100 and 200 block, they've figured out how to take advantage of that with backup house access. Even patio dining areas. And once we get Wonder Block done, that will also be expanded and allow more of that type of access on the south side of 25th Street. So we're excited about that as well. So with the pedestrian patios and the additional parking back there to the south of 25th Street, that will make 25th Street even more viable, I think, as a destination. So yeah. And I'll tell you about the other stories on 25th Street later, or Electric Alley, I should say. Okay. So again, the maps are up here. If you'd like to see more of that, they're also on our webpage. So at a high level, the paid parking system, it won't be the traditional parking meters that you see at each parking space or every other parking space back decades ago. It'll be more like a pay by license plate digital system. That's what most people are using now. We are budgeting and planning for a few kiosks downtown. And so when my mom drives downtown and she wants to pay for her parking with quarters, there'll be a place to do that, and there'll be signage indicating where she can do that. But we're at about, our parking consultants tell us nationally, we're at about 95%. It's up to 95% now are using their cell phones to pay for parking, paid by text, or in the next slide. And by the way, this is the system, what we're currently proposing, and we're going to be sending out a request for proposals from parking vendors is similar to what we're using right now at the airport. And so we already have some experience internally managing that as a city with our IT department. They interface, and then our finance department, and they're involved in those collections as well. And by the way, the collections have gone up quite a bit since we now have commercial flight service at the airport, in case any of you haven't heard. So anyway, which can't be discounted. We've talked to other airports about their, I'm getting off topic, but off their parking revenue for their airports, and parking is the largest revenue of all it's more than the fees they get from the airlines, more than they get from their concessions in the airport. It's parking. That's what's driving the most revenue for their airports. And so it's quite incredible, actually. Just $3 at a time. So And again, I mentioned before, anything we do, we'll be implementing for free if folks use the app for the first few months. And so, and we'll be having more training about that. But basically, this is an example of one of the pay parking systems and the flexibility that it provides, ways to pay, download. This particular one is Park Mobile. You can download the app on the Apple Store, Google Play. You can scan the QR code, you can text to pay, you can pay with Google Pay. And so all those elements are potential, and there's also systems out there that we're looking at which would combine apps. And so our idea is that we want to have the same app for parking anywhere in Ogden. And so that's why we've already had discussions with the county, and they're looking at implementing a paid parking system for a new structure potentially at their site at the county building, for example. And they're all over the idea that it needs to be the same system as Ogden City's implementing, just to and the same thing with the airport. So we'll have the same system across the whole city to make it a more user-friendly situation for our visitors and our residents. Here's the proposed parking rates that we've used for our financial modeling that supports the program. In the most high, I hear some choking, but yeah, hopefully, I'm just, for the most popular areas, the higher per hour rate, and then it would become less expensive the farther away you get from the congested areas, which makes sense. And so kind of a demand parking scenario. These will all be digital as well. And so we have the potential, based upon our learning, to adjust pricing depending on the demand. And so when we have a concert downtown where it's probably 90% coming from other communities, we have the opportunity to create special event rates and parking, and even adjust all of our online systems accordingly. We're not saying we're going to do that yet, but we're going to learn, and it has that kind of flexibility. The system will have that kind of flexibility. And of course, those of you that currently park now in the city parking lot and you'd prefer to have covered parking at the new Wonder Block garage, you could purchase your monthly pass, and that would be a discounted rate over the hourly rate at the new parking structure. And so anyone that's down here all the time, they're probably going to want to have a monthly pass, which you can go online and purchase for yourself or for your employees. All those opportunities will offer a lower cost per hour. Probably the number one question I've gotten for businesses is relative to this slide, and which is why we created it, and that's business employee parking options. And so if employees or business owners are looking for what we call premium parking, that's parking close to where their businesses are, for example, on 25th Street, the Wonder Block parking garages will provide that very conveniently, Electric Alley, and then the Union Station parking lot as well in the specified areas. But if free parking is desired, they may need to walk a block or two. And so, but we are offering that as part of the plan. The junction parking garages will be offered for free for the foreseeable future. We don't have any plans, and we've considered no revenue from the junction parking garages. But if you're in the 200 block of 25th Street, that is a block and a half walk, which in most major cities, that's not a big deal, but it is different than people are used to, okay? And then also UTA parking lots free, especially, but ideally that's if you're using UTAs or the buses, right? And so in the wintertime, if weather's an issue, you could get on the park at UTA parking lot, get on the trolley bus, which comes every few minutes, and takes you right down two of the 3 blocks on 25th Street, back around towards 23rd Street, Kiesel and Washington and so forth. So we are offering some other alternatives, and businesses would be able to handle this with the online portal as well that we'll be developing to facilitate the purchase of monthly passes, employee passes, or also for customer validation. That's the other question that we've been asked about. Will the system be able to offer validation options? So if I have customers that I feel like I need to provide the benefit of parking to, either in 100% of it or a half price or something, if that makes a difference, if they're that price sensitive, I can offer them a validation code to put into the app to get parking for free or reduced cost or something like that. I've also had some customers that have told me that they didn't feel like this would be something they needed at all, just because their customers will come to their restaurant per se, and it didn't matter if they were going to pay $2 or $3 for parking. And so that was their customer base, but every business is different, and the price sensitivity is different for every business. We are also anticipating that we will have like the first 15 minutes for free. So that would help facilitate, like if somebody wanted to pull in and get a cup of coffee or pick up something really quick, a takeout order, they're not having to pay for that whole time, but they will start to get charged after the first few minutes for free. We're still massaging how that will work, but if it will be in designated locations or everywhere, but we're trying to be considerate, and that's based upon the input that we've had from businesses. For you guys, this is not in our public presentation usually, we have spent a lot of time massaging, and we can go into the full spreadsheets of this if you'd like. But the primary big elements for us are the projected revenue based upon the number of spaces that we have, and when they will go online and so forth, versus the operating expenses that we're projecting, which includes employees, insurance, all the different elements, the equipment, the app, and then and what you're looking at here in the green bars is the total revenue that we're projecting over the next 10 years or so, operating expenses in the orange, and then the debt repayment associated with, and this is for the Wonderblock parking structures primarily, with a little bit for the equipment and the hardware for the parking system. That's a small portion of it. Most of this is how we're projecting to repay the bond payments on the Wonderblock parking structures. Okay. And we are putting money aside as part of this as well, into a capital fund for updates and future repairs and maintenance. And so based upon that, the yellow line is what we're showing as the system a return on the project on a year-to-year basis. And again, we can go into the details, and Lisa knows it back and forward, and yep. And so, but it gives you an idea that we are looking at this and what we're considering going forward. I've asked a lot, has there been feedback from businesses? And the answer is yes. We've done quite a few meetings with businesses individually and in groups, and we've gotten a lot of feedback. Just to give you an idea in terms of public engagement, this isn't everything, but it's the ones that I could think of and find. But over the last 3 years, really, starting in 22, we started having meetings with different groups, Chamber and Visit Ogden, Downtown Alliance, and then individual business discussions. The public ones are in blue. So we talked about this at the city council meeting back in November 22, January of 23. We kind of went through a similar presentation in the council meeting when we were talking about the parking bonding parameters. And then we had last month, or in May 22nd, we had the You Make Ogden public meeting and went through the whole presentation. And we're planning on doing several of those again later this fall. And so, and we're continuing to meet with any groups that ask us. So Thursday, I'm meeting with the the Ogden Breakfast Club Exchange, which I had not heard of until they invited me to come talk to them about the paid parking system. So I'll be doing that on Thursday. And if any of you have any groups that you think would be beneficial for us to get the word out about the system, answer questions, take feedback on how we can tweak the system to make it more successful, just let me know and we'll set that up and go do that. Just to give you an idea, here's some of the I think I got 10 here, maybe the top. I won't go through them all, but the top comments I've heard that we kind of keep rotating these around, but from businesses. My favorite was the first one that they were insulted by the only $1 an hour for this kind of undervalues what we offer as a community, but increased confidence to find a spot. All right, here's some specific ones, and I will, in consideration of time, won't go through all these, but we talked about providing free parking for the first 3 or 4 months, a grace period, if you will. What is planned to help with more parking on 25th Street? The Wonder Block structures, pedestrian paths are also planned, and we have ideas on how to enhance those and make those safer and more attractive going forward over the next few years. Paid parking will encourage faster turnover. Won't paid parking keep visitors from coming downtown? Local businesses have indicated that once visitors figure out how the system works, the paid parking system will not discourage their customers, likely help bring more customers downtown. But it'll take a few months. There'll be some folks that are upset and not too happy, and they'll be calling you guys, and so that's why we wanted to have this discussion and make sure if you don't have all the information you need to talk about the paid parking system, let us know. We can get you that information or equip you with whatever you feel like you need if we're not answering the questions that you're getting, okay? So just let us know. But it'll be tough for a few months. And so I have some letters in my office and newspaper articles with people's writing on them that have been mailed to me. And it's yeah, there's some people that will be not too happy with us, but in the end, we really do believe that this will be a benefit to our community. And that's been proven in other cities that have gone before us. Where paid parking works, I mean, we've gone through and we have more of these, but we're trying to make them comparable size-wise to Ogden City. I know no one wants to hear about Denver or Los Angeles relative to paid parking. It's more like communities like Rapid City. And the quote that I have here from Rapid City is, this is a Rapid City business. We have a lot of support from the city. Our citizens, this is actually from the city. Citizens are very receptive to the new plan. Our business owners and other stakeholders are supportive of it. The biggest goal is parking turnover. Previously, the biggest problem we had was 2 to 3 hour parking downtown. So employees would park right outside their place of work and move their car every couple hours, which takes up prime parking. The new system discourages that. Now we have permits for employees on the periphery. Paid parking and transportation. Yes, it will encourage public transportation, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Yes.
So I think one of the things that we really want to hear from you about is the new position that you've requested, the parking mobility supervisor. If you can get that, because we have a couple of things, other things we need to.
Okay. Yeah. Let me go right to that. Here's this slide, implementation schedule. Okay. So if we are to stay on schedule and that chart I showed you before with the parking revenue and the associated bond payments and so forth, if we're to stay on schedule, we really need to move forward on posting and hiring the new parking and mobility operations supervisor in the next month or two. One of their primary objectives right off the bat will be managing the request for proposals and the education related to the new parking vendor and equipment acquisition and all of the upcoming public discussions and community engagement with our citizens and visitors. And so coordinating the website, the e-commerce activities, all those activities. And so that's something we need to move forward on right away. Then within the next month, we hope to publish the paid parking system request for proposals. That will be for a parking vendor that will help us manage the system. That may not be permanent, but we know for the next 3 years, we've never ran a parking system before. There are firms that do this all the time, and they have experience that we can learn from. And so our plan is to contract with such a firm that will run the day-to-day activities under the supervision of our parking and mobility operations supervisor. And then we're also doing an RFP, or request for proposals, for the equipment and software portions of that activity as well. So that needs to be done in order to stay on schedule in the next month or so. And then we'll be talking a little bit later about the new parking ordinance, because this changes our parking activities and enforcement activities in the city. And so we're working on the city parking ordinance, which you guys will need to adopt later this summer. Award the contracts for the paid parking management systems by early fall, and then schedule and hold the additional public houses to introduce the parking system and train folks on that late in the late fall, and initially roll out the first phase at the last couple months of the year, and then go online with the paid parking system. Actually start charging on 25th and Kiesel in the spring, early part of 2025. And so that will get us to the point that we need to implement the paid parking system and stay on schedule to generate the revenues and actually do this to the benefit of our overall community. So that's the plan. There's more information on our, I think there's links in your packet to this webpage, which has additional documents. And I also have additional documents up here, a lot of those that are on the website, if any of you are interested. And just a reminder, the reason we do all these not so fun things sometimes is because we're really trying to improve the overall place that we live in, right? So placemaking is a word we use a lot in development and redevelopment, just reinventing public spaces in the heart of our community. And so, and overall, it just builds our sustainability as a community going forward. Instead of just leaving it to chance, it's helping to proactively make sure these things happen for the future of our community. That's it.
Comment?
Yes, sir.
All right. So first of all, you talked about your mother taking her quarters down to pay for the parking. I was just in Park City on Friday night and did the pay parking there, and it was just about 5 times what you listed what our public.
Oh,
parking is
price-wise? Yeah.
on Main Street. Yeah, I paid
sure.
$20 for 2 hours. So, the pricing that you're looking at is very reasonable compared to what Park City is on their Main Street, which is somewhat comparable to 25th Street. They're probably busier there, but I think that solves a lot of problems. You've done a lot of studying and review of this, and so thanks so much. It's a great presentation.
Sure.
David, from writing the RFP for the equipment to its installation and ability to actually get up and running by the first of the year, are those kiosks, is this system basically software behind the scenes and pretty much bolted to the sidewalk in it and make an internet connection and they
Yep.
run?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
No
So
wiring. I mean,
it's not a
solar
big
panel.
infrastructure undertaking to, like the charging stations down
No,
here.
in fact, when we originally started or got the proposal from our parking consultant, they projected out the price for all the hardware and equipment, and it was a particular number. And 6 months ago, they told me that the price is actually probably going to be less because fewer and fewer communities are using the hardware, and it's becoming more software and digital based. And so we've gone from, I think the original proposal was like 36 of those kiosks downtown to we're probably closer to 10 or 12. And so like one a block or so. So they're with signage directing people or apps that tell people where they can go to pay at the kiosk if they need to. So,
Okay.
but the utilization's down to single digits now.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you know this or not, but are we looking to promote someone to this position, hire within? Are we seeking somebody from outside of the city?
I think I would say ideally, we're looking for somebody that actually has experience with that's been operating a parking system. Our consultants have told us that, and we reviewed the job description with them too, that this, believe it or not, there is a parking industry, and there are professionals that do this across the country and have that management experience. And this would be considered a plum opportunity for somebody with that kind of background, because number one, everybody wants to live here, right? And so they just look at the pictures of the place. And number two, it's an opportunity to create and develop a new parking system where they perhaps are working in one that's been established for many years. And so this would be an opportunity, and they expect we'll get a lot of interest. And not only would we post this, but then also put it out on some industry trade sites. And so they would push that out for us as well. So it'll be interesting to see what we come up with. I'm not saying that we won't consider somebody internally. We haven't really talked that much about that, but I think ideally we'd like to see somebody that has some experience in managing a parking vendor or working in that environment. Make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, David.
Okay. And let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll leave some of these other
those,
documents
yeah.
up here that you
Perfect.
guys can grab.
All right, Lisa Stout, Management Director. Oh, Justin, that's all right. Come on up, Justin. Hopefully we have enough time on this proposed parking and mobility enterprise fund.
Thank you, Chair. This will be short and
Okay.
brief. So I told Lisa, I said I had a 30-minute presentation plan, but it'll be more like 30 seconds. So
We have 10 minutes per slide.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
So as part of the budget this year and in conjunction with the discussion we just had with the new paid parking system is the need to, and in the proposed or in the tentative budget that's been adopted is a new fund to track the expenses and revenues related to the parking and mobility. And so the proposal, there's two different items. The first is there's a proposed resolution that would adopt this new enterprise fund, and we'll call it the Parking and Mobility Enterprise Fund, to be able to track the paid parking program and the mobility services that will be offered. And then the other item is a proposed ordinance to update the municipal code, the Ogden Municipal Code Section 2-4-15, to include the Parking and Mobility Fund under the Responsible Department of Management Services. In reviewing that code, it was discovered that the medical fund, the airport fund, and the BDO fund were not identified. And so we wanted to make that update as well. And so those are also included in that proposed ordinance to add the medical fund under the responsibility of the fire department, and the BDO and property fund and the airport fund under our community and economic development. So just to give you, let's see. There we go. So I just wanted to share this with you. So these with this proposal, this would be all of our current enterprise funds if you adopt this resolution. So the department that they're responsible to. So right now under public services, we have the different utilities: our water, sanitary sewer, refuse, and storm, and also the golf courses and recreation. This would be one under management services, the parking and mobility. CED would have the airport and BDO, and then fire is the medical services fund. So again, the request would be to consider this proposed resolution and proposed ordinance in a future council meeting.
So Justin, will the position be in the enterprise fund? The supervisor would be
Yes.
in the enterprise fund. So theoretically, it would be paid 100% out of there. Obviously, it would have to be subsidized for the first couple of years.
Correct. That is a great question. So in the proposed budget this year, we've proposed to put funds from BDO lease revenue into that to begin funding that fund, because we know there's the position and there's going to be some operational costs. And so, yes, this position will be funded in that enterprise fund. And then And then so then as we begin to have revenues come in, we would record those in that fund, and then any expenses associated with would go out of that fund. So just like we do our other enterprise funds.
All right, any questions for Justin? It's pretty straightforward. Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Some council business. We have rodeo tickets. Do you want to talk about that, Janine?
Yeah, so we don't physically have the rodeo tickets, but we know from contractual agreement that we have 20 tickets per night for the council. So of course, everybody would like to go on the 24th. And that's possible if you only take 3 people or whatever, but what we need you to do, if you would, is by Friday, kind of put us in your requests for what night you want tickets and how many. And then we'll try and divvy it up the best we can. If some reason we can't meet your request, then we'll come back to you and figure out how we can negotiate it. But so the tickets are the 19th and 20th, and then 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. So there's not a rodeo on that Sunday. So if you could let us know by Friday, let me know by Friday how you'd like to divvy that up, that would be great.
And then also we're looking to do the recognition on the 19th for the rodeo clown and Randy, the announcer. Yeah.
Right. And I think you don't necessarily have to sit through the rodeo or have rodeo tickets to do that recognition. So you could just go and we'll figure out a way for you to be able to get through and be the recognition and then leave. So hopefully we can make that work. One other thing, this is the ethics commitment. This is something that all employees have to fill out every year. And so if you would just, I meant to do it last week when everybody was here, but I forgot. So if you would just fill that out, I would really appreciate it. Get it back to me tonight if you could.
And then
Kind of rodeo related, with the ribbon cutting on the 16th in our work session at what time?
yeah, that's the next thing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
The work
Sorry.
session will start at 3.
Okay,
So there is a 5 o'clock business after hours that starts where they'll be serving hors d'oeuvres. It's in conjunction with the ribbon cutting, but the ribbon cutting itself doesn't start until 6. And then there's also going to be a dinner after that. So you should have an actual invitation in your box. And so that's why I was confused, but it's 2 different organizations doing the 2 things just in conjunction with each other. So we'll start at 3, probably have you out just a few minutes before 5, give you a minute to, pull yourself together and then get down there and be there for the event. Huh?
Start here at 3.
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So looks like we will, in our meeting, we have an option to go into closed session. Well, looks like we'll be wanting to do that. So yeah. Sound good? Okay. With that, then we are adjourned till 6 o'clock.